Hey YouTube. Alright, so I just wanted to kind of show what I did here to the sector gear and the sector shaft. So in the last video, if you noticed, and for anybody who's wondering, yes, it was put on the opposite way in the last video at the end because I was just checking the fitment of the gear itself. But as you see, it's the proper way now. So when I put it all back together, it was better with the new key. Here was the old one, if you remember. And Steiner sent 2 of these in their kit. Well, when I put it all back together, the new key made a difference, but it still had a little bit of side-to-side play. Wasn't really happy with it because this ends up having a little bit of play, this ends up having play, the gears themselves worn out a little bit on this and the shaft having play. It's all going to add up to the point where you're going to have that 9 and 3 o'clock steering. None of us want that. So what I did was I was going to go ahead and break apart, obviously, some shims from a feeler gauge. And I was going to go ahead and sandwich it between here to take up that difference and try to tighten up that side-to-side action. Well, then I started thinking about it, looking at it a little bit closer. And even though these are worn, this top edge, even if I go ahead and put a cut piece of feeler gauge in there, it's a good possibility that what's going to happen is eventually this gear at that top edge is going to keep banging over, and it's just going to take this feeler gauge and tip it over the same way. So without having to buy a sector gear, since for the most part it's good, it just has a little bit of play in it, and the sector shaft was actually pretty good. Again, no reason to have to go and spend, was it 140 for the gear, and I think it's like 100 for the sector shaft. I mean, that's, a little expensive for just a little bit of slop, not knowing if the new parts are going to be any tighter than this. So long story short, I wanted to go ahead and raise this up a little bit, so that way it was a tighter fit. Let me see if I can get a little pointer so my finger's not in the way. I wanted it a tighter fit at the top in the keyway in here, because again, side to side wasn't as bad. It just felt like it needed to come up some, and I didn't want to cut a piece of the shim small enough to slide down into the top and then have to worry about trying to finagle all that and keep it. It just didn't make any sense to me. So what I did was, in the bottom of the sector gear, in that half moon cutout that's inside there, I just took a piece of wire, and basically about this length, it was about 1.25 inches or so. I went ahead and laid it down inside the groove, put the key in, and then I tapped it down with the brass hammer. So once I tapped it down, obviously, it conformed to the key. And also, in essence, what it did was it flattened out the wire. So instead of being round, it was nice and flat. So I made basically a shim. After I got it flat, I took the wire back out, snipped it off halfway, laid it down inside, laid the key down, because as you see it's flat right in here. Laid the key down inside, and then I tapped it as far as I could go. I went ahead and I put it in the sector shaft, put the gear on, and started tapping the gear to get this to go ahead and go in. Now obviously, once you start tapping it, since now you have a shim in there, it made one side want to cradle up, like that. Well, I knew I was going to do that, but I wanted to flatten that wire out so that way it's going to take a long time to mush that wire to the point where I'll get any more play. My whole end goal was I wanted this woodruff key to come up higher. I wanted it to be a snug fit and push up inside there as tight as I could to make it really snug. So as I started tapping the gear down, I kept tapping down with the brass hammer down on top of the key, kept smashing it down, tap the gear, smash it down, tap the gear, to the point where I was able to drive the gear completely on. As you see now, there is absolutely zero play between the gear and the sector shaft. So between the new bearing being tight, no play up inside this lock, nothing moves, the gear doesn't move. This is good. This is now a done deal. Checking the mesh of the gears against the steering shaft again, they don't seem worn enough to warrant trying to replace this. Can't replace it on the shaft anyway. I think these will be fine. Now, the only other issue that seems like obviously everybody has is the bottom link. So this will actually go on the tractor like this. Oh, let me get back in the video. it will actually go in the tractor like this. This is how the arm's going to go on. It's going to go ahead and, let me turn it the right way. Obviously it will sit down there. Problem is, as you see, it's got side to side wiggle. It's got up and down wiggle. If you look inside, I'm not sure if I can show this, but I'm going to try. So inside there, where you got this notch right here versus where the bolt goes in and locks through, even if you put the bolt in, that's a lot of play back and forth. So what it looks to me is, obviously, these right here start to wobble out a little bit. So when that bolt goes in to lock that in place, well, with it being different than the size that's inside here of that notch, basically it's not tightening up, it's moving back and forth. So what I'm going to do to repair these two, I was going to go ahead and drill this out and actually put a 1/2 inch bolt in there. Obviously going to a 1/2 inch bolt, once it would go in, it's going to be a fatter bolt. So as you draw that through, it will actually pull tighter to that gear, that sector shaft, and actually lock that in place. Could work. Problem is clamping pressure. If I end up drilling this out to a 1/2 inch bolt, it's a good possibility that this arm could end up breaking through here. I really don't want to break the arm. So what I'm going to basically do is do a match set. So I don't really want to alter the arm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and weld this part of the shaft up a little bit more, and I'm actually going to build this up some. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this on, and I'm going to keep grinding back away slowly until this has a nice snug fit. So that way there's no more play going this way in the bolt. In order to take up that play, that side to side, as you can see, these 3 points of contact right here do a lot of wobbling. You can only clamp this so tight. Even if you clamp it, a lot of people, what they're doing, you could take like a beer can, soda can, make some shims up, shove some shims in there, and then try to put it all in place, lock it down, and do that. If you're planning on keeping the tractor, whether it's for work, whether it's for shows, whatever you're doing, obviously you want that steering to be tight. I mean, if we have a 11-2, or 11-1, turn on it, I mean, it's 70-year-old tractors. So you're going to have some kind of play in it. You just don't want to go from 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock trying to, turn the wheel back and forth. It's pretty unsafe. So I'm going to go ahead and weld a bead of weld down all 3 points of the shaft right here. And again, I'm going to start with one. I'm going to go ahead and weld this one up. And then I'm going to go ahead and slowly grind it until it has a really nice, snug fit. Once I'm happy with that one, I'm going to go ahead and weld the next one. Same thing. I'm going to pre-fit it and get it in. It's a good possibility that once I weld these two, I may not have to weld this one. It may tighten itself right up. But I might go ahead and run a bead of weld anyway through here. Again, grind that off, fit it to the point where when this shaft goes on, you almost have to tap it on, but I don't want to have to drive it on with a hammer. I want to be able to just snug this up, put that bolt in, and once that thing clamps, I don't want to see any movement in this whatsoever. It's going to work. So my next video, what I'm going to show is, I'm going to show steps on welding all the spots, grinding, and I'm just going to basically do the whole video showing the whole process, but obviously I'm going to fast forward through a lot of the welding and stuff because I don't think everybody wants to sit through that. And then we're going to go ahead and snug this shaft up. And then this steering in this tractor should be probably just as good as, since only the people who bought these tractors originally know how good the steering was originally. We don't know personally, but we do know that we can always make improvements and make it better. So obviously stay tuned for the next video. Obviously I'm going to have to weld this up too, because this looks like somebody at one point tried to go ahead and tighten this bolt up as much as they could. And when they did, they popped a little hunk up and split that right there. So obviously, well, feels like that's going to come right off. So I'm going to go ahead and fix this as well. So that way, that area right there where that split is, that will be fixed. So stay tuned for the next video, and we will keep going on this 49 Super A. I do have one thing to show. I went ahead and I'm in my other shop right now, so the shop's a little different than the last one. I went ahead and sandblasted the upper and lower unit, so that's all cleaned up. Looks much better than it did when we started. So, and then I got the U-bolts sandblasted and everything's hung ready for primer. So the next video obviously will show, once I get that gear all welded up, we're gonna go ahead and start putting this unit back together, and then get it on the tractor and actually see how snug this is. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget, if you can, please subscribe, like, and share. Again, I'm new to this whole YouTube thing, and I know you're supposed to ask that and say that, so that way I can keep producing more videos. So, you guys have a great weekend.